Hi, everyone. I'm Jan Mercer-Doms, the Vice President of U.S. Development with Join Mayshad. We're an ecosystem of brands for women by women, connecting women to each other and to the companies, causes, and organizations that champion equity for women professionally and personally. Today, you're here with us watching our Women in Money series. Please make sure to tune in to our YouTube channel and subscribe to stay up to date on all of our upcoming shows, our content, our workshops, and opportunities for you to be engaged with our network. Please make sure to check out joinmayshad.com. I'm here today with Yolanda Johnson. Hi, Yolanda, welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
You're very welcome. Yolanda is the founder of Women in Color and Fundraising and Philanthropy and the president of YFJ Consulting and a professional musician. Yolanda, I cannot wait to hear your story. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I love the fact that you're a professional musician. And it's so interesting because at Mayshad, we often talk about the complexity of our identities and all the different various roles we play as professional women and how we show up. And the fact that the collected sort of nuanced nature of our passions and our interests and our professions actually blend and enrich so much to what we bring to the table. I would love for you to talk to us about your story in the sense of how you blend your work as an artist and a professional musician with your passion for fundraising and championing nonprofit spaces.
Well, I started to realize years ago that I was at this distinct advantage as a fundraiser and as a person working in philanthropy because I was calling upon my performance background to get into character, to breathe, to do all the different things that I would do to ask people for millions of dollars or show people how they should be giving, advise them as to how they should be giving their money. And so I created something called All the World's a Stage. It's a performance practice workshop that I give, well, before COVID, I gave all over the place for lots and lots of fundraisers and philanthropists, board members, different people to help them dig into their authentic best selves is what I usually call it, and figure out how to pivot and how to be in that character in order to get this work done.
It's interesting. I think in this moment in time too, look like we're all in front of Zoom, right? And we're so much of what we're doing now is in front of a screen, whereas many of us in the past really lived professionally face to face in meetings and working with our teams and traveling and meetings and conferences and et cetera, et cetera. But now that we're in the digital space, I'm wondering if kind of the theme of being on stage and being in performance is even more important and more valuable in the sense of how you think about like how do you show up, right? Like what sort of role do you play in the sense of how you persuade, how you convince, how you wow and razzle dazzle. What are some tips that you have for us who may be watching this, for whom this may be a new space, but we're thinking about like how are we showing up as a personal brand?
Well, I think 3 different things. You heard me say something before, your authentic best self. So we all want to tap into, I call it the treasure trove of fabulousness that you already have there, and that gives you the confidence. But the thing that the one variable that you can't make up and you can't really fake is preparation. And so that's why even when I'm presenting All the World's a Stage, I remind people you got to be prepared. Years ago, I was backstage, like praying, God, please, I know I haven't practiced. I know I don't know anything that's going on here, but perform a miracle. Let me get out there and be able to get on stage and do this perfectly. And it was like, that was a change for me, a turning point for me, because I was like, I don't want to be that way in anything that I do. I want to honor whatever it is that I'm doing by preparing for it. And that preparation gives you this new sense of confidence where you can actually imbue things with your own personal style of things. When you know something so well, you're ready for it. You can pivot, you can do whatever. You can blend, facets of yourself into it in different types of ways and be creative where you can't if you're not really prepared.
Do you find that, in this moment in time too, that your work as a fundraising professional has changed because of COVID? And I would imagine that, in the world of fundraising, it's all about professional relationships, right? And really nurturing and taking care of, major donors and foundations and, even government sources of monies. Like that's all about relationship building and cultivation. What are some of the differences that you're seeing now because of this new world that we're all living in?
Well, it certainly has changed, and I exist at the intersection of fundraising and philanthropy, and it's been fascinating to see what's happened. We've had a lot of conversations around the fact that now you're in this virtual realm, like you said, to your point, life's about relationships. Fundraising and philanthropy definitely is. So just finding the heart of technology, I call it, getting to um, those human aspects and those the connectivity of technology when you're worn out because you've had 5, 6 Zoom sessions in one day. And then also giving people the opportunity to decide what works best for them. I have seen the resurgence of the phone call. Like, unless the house is burning down, don't call me, text me for that. But now it's like, do we have to Zoom? Can you just like call me and let's chat? And so that's been really interesting as well. So communication styles have changed. We've had to rethink, and reprioritize programming and leadership at nonprofit organizations just to make sure, in some ways it's survival of the fittest because we have organizations that have similar missions and things like that. But people have to really go back and do a mission audit. What do you say you do and why are you here? And what are you doing? And what is your priority right now? And then on the other end, philanthropists have been taking a step back to see how they will analyze and prioritize their philanthropy based, now what I have seen is donors are very loyal as best they can be. If they said they would give you a gift, most donors gave that gift this year. What's going to be interesting is heading into the year-end period to see how all of the emergency measures and initiatives that were taken, how they play out through the end of the year and then heading into 2021 because it's all such an uncertain time. But I have hope that we'll be able to move forward in a good way.
It's so interesting what you're saying because I remember from my nonprofit days that, for many organizations, 90% of their fundraising actually happens in the last month of the calendar year. Mm-hmm. And wondering now, as organizations and nonprofits really think through, like, what is the right mix of, general support fundraising, unrestricted fundraising versus restricted fundraising? Do you find that, in the work that you do, that donors are becoming, especially during this time, even more financially astute in the sense of how they measure impact and value for their dollar?
Most certainly so. Just like the organizations and the nonprofits are having to do that mission audit and see if they've had mission creep, if they're really fulfilling what they said that they would be doing. On the other end, the donors are really taking stock because you know what? A lot of their net worth has changed. So, and the fundraisers have to be sensitive to that. And the donors are trying to, make different decisions. One of the most fascinating things that has happened is also the resurgence of planned giving. It's a macabre thing to think about. We don't want to think about that, but COVID has really had a profound impact on the philanthropy side of things because people are starting to think about their legacy. This thing is quite something, right? It's resulted in a lot of unexpected and sad things that have happened. And so people are really starting to be like, this is the legacy I want to leave. This is what I want to do right now. So those priorities are shifting as well, even with the states, because, there have been a lot of changes with different things that have happened. So those are the darker side of things that we don't want to necessarily think about, but they're realities. And the due diligence as a fundraiser would be to make sure that in your own strides that you're able to tackle these and make sure that you're taking the right steps.
It's so interesting what you're saying because we know, in speaking with a lot of people in the educational system, many teachers are writing wills for the first time. Yeah. Right. And something that we should all, that's just a good life practice to have that in place as an adult anyway. But, particularly using this moment in time, to your point, to really step back and reflect and envision not even beyond the extent of what present do you want to live in, what future do you want to create for yourself and your family, but what is your legacy? And what is the meaning that you want to attach to the world after you're gone?
Yeah.
It's fascinating because I also think that during this moment in time that, we talk a lot about Mayshad around how we're using these moments to step back and reflect and think about our own relationship to our careers and going through a process of understanding who do we want to be when we grow up. And, and then thinking through, those moments and times where we may need to pivot and we may need to think about, expanding our horizons or maybe having a multiple tiered strategy in place in the same way that we diversify our portfolio. thinking about the ways in which we want to diversify our career. And you're multi-talented and you're simultaneously professionally left brain and right brain. Talk to me a bit about how you think your work as a musician in that performance space will evolve and change over time. And then we'll talk about your work as a fundraiser in the sense of how you think that that will evolve and change over time as well.
How I think it will evolve and change. Well, the life of an artist is always evolving, right? I think one of the biggest evolutions that I've seen as I've matured and experienced life is the type of music that I like to champion. And so, it's interesting because there are parallels still between both sides of my life here. I noticed that I have this affinity for uh, unearthing this amazing music by African American classical composers, which can, be considered by many to be quite unique. It's not totally unique, but it needs to be out there more in the mainstream because there are a lot of talented people creating right now. The work of women composers. I have a special concert lecture called Music She Wrote. It starts with Hildegard von Bingen from the 13th century, and then it goes all the way through to people who have set things for my voice who are still living in New York City right now. And so again, I find myself championing people of color and women, trying to get their work out there and be seen. And I've also evolved, and I think I'll continue to evolve, using arts for social justice. And to really, sometimes it's art for art's sake. Sometimes you just need to see or hear something beautiful, and that's fine. But what I was able to do is find something that was beautiful, that needed to be seen. Last year, I produced and starred in Giancarlo Menotti's The Consul. And we set it at the American consulate in Mexico, and we tackled the immigration debate through this beautiful music, exquisite music. And some people were like, and then we had a talk back session afterwards, and people were riled up because this art had made them really think about, and connect with these characters in a whole different way. And people were like, did you change the words? And we were like, no, these words are 70 years old and they could have been on the news last week. So that's the art side, I think.
I'm wondering, when I listen to what you're saying, my mind immediately goes to the experiences that many nonprofits bring to their donors and their potential donors, in the sense of kind of the lived experience. Mm-hmm. And many nonprofit organizations have donor trips to take donors to their work, and they create opportunities to be able to experience their work in ways where it's not just necessarily, the relationship is much more than just writing a check, but it's actually bringing that lived experience. And I'm wondering if this is a moment in time, given the fact that we're not traveling too much, that we're kind of homebound, and that the global world for all of us has become much more locally focused. Mm-hmm. If you foresee innovation happening for nonprofit organizations so that they can continue to bring those experiences, particularly for nonprofits that are having to cancel their big annual gala, or to really rethink how they engage their donor constituency, but yet still in this moment in time to be able to bring some sort of experience to them.
Yes, definitely. I happen to be on the board of trustees of the Hudson River Museum, and we just had the annual gala, and it was a virtual event, and it was one of the best that I've seen. It got to the heart of technology. It was an artist named Derek Adams who really explores the relationship between African Americans and water, and it's a loaded kind of thing there, recreation water, the history of it. And so it was kind of like a pool party theme, and so they sent out towels to people ahead of time, and people were taking pictures with their beach towels at their pool or wherever they were, and that really pulled people in a different kind of way. So I think there are a lot of creative things that you can do still in this virtual space. And the most exciting thing about the virtual space is that the whole world is your audience. You could get thousands of people this time because they don't have to physically come to whatever ballroom, for the event. So I think that that, and then just finding ways to allow donors to still connect with each other. The Zoom room is a really fantastic thing. So
I want to go back to something you were talking about earlier, in the sense of, just many of the donors that you work with just saying, can we just have a phone call? Can we just, pick up the phone and have a conversation? It's interesting because I feel like so much of what we think about now is that we have to have the face-to-face. So Zoom and, calls like this are the answer to that. But yet, do you find that actually picking up the phone and having that conversation is more personal because it's different right now?
It can be. I think that we as human beings just thrive on variety. Many people like to have routine, but sometimes you need a little variety because you'll just go nutty if you're sitting here every day in conversation. It's like I've heard people say it feels like Groundhog Day. Like, which conversation is this? And then, so I think sometimes it just switches it up a little bit. You hear their voice. I think it's very creative, right? Somewhere subconsciously, you don't know what they're doing. You don't know where they're sitting. Um, there's a mystique, I guess, about the phone call because you don't have that visual. But also, there's less pressure, to be all put together to have the conversation as well. So, yeah.
So true. So true. Talk to us about your passion behind Women of Color and fundraising and what you ultimately want to achieve through that organization.
Well, I happen to be the first Black president of Women in Development in New York, the New York City chapter, which is just celebrated its 40th anniversary. And so that was a big diversity milestone. As part of that experience, I launched a diversity and inclusion task force 2 years ago that just culminated this spring. And then I wrote an article about it that appeared in the Chronicle of Philanthropy as well about DEI from the inside out, just the process and what I learned, especially at this moment in time in this country, just what I learned about things. And I realized that there needed to be a space that was created for the unique experience of being a woman of color in fundraising and philanthropy. And so the work continues at WID. I'm still the president of WID, but I decided to create Woke. So it's Women of Color.
That.
Thank you. I thought I was so clever at first. So I called my friends and be like, and how do you say it? But
I love it.
So Woke just comes from my heart. I'm really excited. I'm very humbled at being able to have this opportunity and this platform. We're about 10 weeks old and we have heading towards 700 members now.
And congratulations. That is so cool.
Across the country, even around the world, we have international members as well. And so, and then even from Woke, which exists to celebrate and support and champion women of color in the professions, during this moment of this racial equity movement, I had a lot of non-people of color calling me and emailing me and writing to me and saying, help, what do I do to do better right now? And I felt that we were really on the cusp of something different this time. I feel it. I feel that real change could happen this time. And so I said, okay, I'm here for that. So I created something called Allies in Action, a membership network as well for allies. And so that's based upon 4 pillars of education, legislation, inclusion, and action, which includes a philanthropic component where we're going to make sure that they're aware of some major and some not so major organizations that support racial equity and women and girls of color. So those are all the things that we have going on, and Allies is created to support the women of Woke as well. So it's been an exciting time.
Congratulations. That's incredible growth in a short period of time. And I think you're right in the sense that it feels like this is a different moment in time. And yet we often hear from people in our network that that we hope that it's not something that's soon forgotten, because this is also a nation that we tend to forget things very quickly, right? And
with the news cycle, yeah.
Exactly. And so, I love what you're doing because it's in so many ways, so much more impactful. I think because you are thinking about the future, you're thinking about the longer term with it. What advice do you have for social justice advocates, for women who may be involved with philanthropy and giving, and entrepreneurs that are launching their businesses? Because here's the thing, like we talked a bit about the personal branding component of being on stage, right? But then there's also the selling component of everything that we're doing right now. Like you're selling ideas, you're selling memberships, you're selling your convincing hearts and minds. And so many of us do that on a daily basis and find that we're really struggling right now because there's so much noise out there. There's so much noise and there's so much anxiety and so much fear that, okay, so what if this is the potential in a moment in time in our history to go 10 steps ahead, but yet afraid that we may fall behind 20 steps because of all the other forces that are at play working against us right now. Mm-hmm. As a fundraising professional, what advice do you have for all of us in the sense of not just how we show up, but how can we be effective sellers in our life if that makes sense.
It's interesting when it comes to this moment and when you're talking about everything with racial equity, because I had a very interesting conversation with a colleague this morning where I said, I think we're also on the cusp of real authenticity. And what I mean by that is a really wonderful thing, but it's also a daunting thing, because I think people are going to start seeing true colors and have to start being honest about things, and they're going to have to start making decisions about them accordingly. So, I said, you might even have to look at, when you're trying to diversify leadership groups and boards, if there are people that are resistant to positive change, it's like, what do you do with that? I think that it'll be a very interesting future. But, so to answer your question, are you selling something? Really, what you're doing, it's the same reason why, I've been asked to endorse some candidates and different things, and I don't necessarily take that path. But what I say I will do is illuminate the path, because you cannot change a person, and you cannot change their hearts, and you don't know what, you don't know what somebody's really thinking and feeling and where they're at. But you can give them tools, and you can help them see what's right and the truth. And we're all wrong sometimes, and we all do our best every day, to do what's right. But you can't force feed this. That's what I learned from the DEI task force, is that you can't force this. You can light the path and send people down as fundraisers and philanthropists.
That's so impactful, and I think you're spot on. I think particularly in this moment in time, and it's interesting that something as simple as whether or not to wear a mask has become a political debate and a political divide. And how you think about health and wellness and safety and inclusion and belonging and understanding. And we're moving into this world where so many of these things that we talk about are soft skills, and they're not necessarily something that's easily measurable. Whereas we can measure diversity, but then how do you include, and how do you create that sense of belonging, and how do you really expand upon that to really make that experience meaningful and impactful and potentially life altering for everyone at the table, is a much more complicated question. It's, I think in this moment in time too, not just the deep reflection part of it, but mustering up the courage to actually do something about it, right? And taking action and figuring out what that is for yourself and for your community.
Yeah.
And like bringing in the energy that you want to be surrounded with, which is something that was reminded by something you had just said around, like, around the energy that you want to have around you, and figuring out people's true colors.
Yeah. And I think, what I really want everyone to walk away from this knowing is that I truly believe, I'm convinced and confident that there is a place for everyone to shine their light, really, right now. I was on a panel recently, and I actually had to stop and take a pause because I saw some of the comments that were being made over in the chat, where some people were really discouraged and they didn't know what place they had. There was a white male who was like, what am I supposed to be doing? There are other females of color that were like, I wonder what I'm supposed to be doing. And I was like, people, find your network, find your community, find whatever it is, talk to your financial advisor, think about your philanthropic priorities, and put those dollars to work, into action. You can really make a positive change. And for the fundraisers, they're out there doing the good work as well. I just think that we have to all accept, hopefully in a positive way, and in a hopeful way, that everybody has a part in this, however large, seemingly large or small. Sometimes we don't even know. I had a panel discussion at the launch of Woke, and suddenly this young woman writes on LinkedIn that because of that discussion, she's going to continue writing her book. She had imposter syndrome about being a young woman of color in philanthropy. But, I don't know exactly what words were spoken, and I was like, oh, you're just living your life and trying to do whatever it is that you do. But just remember, there's always somebody watching. There's always somebody who can be influenced in a positive way that you're not even aware of. And so, yeah.
Do you think in this moment in time too, that for many people, it's harder to make a decision because it's all changing so quickly, right? So like month number 1 of COVID looks and feels very different than month number 5 for most of us. And yet we're still all in it, right? Like we're not going back to anything that resembled normalcy in the past anytime soon. And so from a like, how do I create better change in the world? How do I allocate my dollars to charities? How do I be a better citizen? How do I be and show more empathy and understanding and be a better leader? This is a moment in time where I can see where the decision to make a decision has become very muddied and very complex.
Yeah.
So you feel paralyzed, right? And it dawned on me when you were talking about those examples of the people who, were chatting at your launch. Maybe there's, this level of paralysis that people really want to do something, but they're afraid that whatever decision they're going to make is the wrong decision, because you look at the stock market, as you know, that ebbs and flows so crazy on a day-to-day basis right now. And, there's so many really well-deserving charities out there, which I would imagine many of them are also struggling with fundraising right now because of the focus on coronavirus, right? And the health and wellness aspect of that. What do you see in the sense of, is that true? Are there nonprofits that really, from your perspective, if someone were to say, how should I allocate my monies right now? How should I think about, allocating money or time, right? Because those are two things that, philanthropic organizations really crave. For those of us that do want to make a difference, how do we go about that decision-making process?
Well, I think that from the philanthropic perspective, you just, again, have to think about what change do you want to see? What are your own personal priorities? And what legacy do you want to leave behind based upon the things that you believe in and the things that you want to be seeing now? We have to remain in the present, especially right now. I think that, it was clear that emergency funding was a top priority, because how are you going to help somebody if they don't have a place, a roof over their head, or an organization, an office over their head? How do you help them if they're hungry? You can, it goes back to a lot of ancient principles about, first you should try to help people, and then you can help causes. So I would say that you have to help people first, with their basic needs, and then you can go further after that, all based upon the changes that you want to see in the world. So you might prioritize women and girls, you might prioritize youth, you might prioritize women, because a lot of issues came out of this now, with domestic violence and lots of other, this really brought up, it dredged up a lot of issues. So, prioritize according to what's on your heart. So it's people, it's your heart, and then everything else comes after that, I think, right now at this particular moment.
I love that. Lead with your heart.
Right now you can, yeah.
Here's a question for you. So, I think many people often wonder about the complexity of charitable giving from should I give to an organization that's very well established, right? Who is steeped in deep history, has been around for a really long time, doing amazing work, probably pretty large, right? Mm-hmm. When we know that large nonprofits often have very high administrative, costs associated with that. And so how much of my dollar is actually going to support the programming that they do on the ground, versus smaller nonprofits who may be much more flexible and much more lean, much more salt of the earth, and closer to the communities in which they serve. But often those nonprofits are so cash strapped that they have a hard time meeting cash flow, mm-hmm. right? And so kind of the dichotomy between the extreme differences between wanting your monies to be able to be put to good use, but also with an organization where there's some assurance that they're going to be around for a while. How does one evaluate that in one's mind?
Well, I have been privy to some conversations between some financial institutions, and what they're telling some of their clients who have philanthropic priorities is that you really do have to do due diligence and check 990s and really understand exactly what's going on. That's the best thing that an organization can do right now, is communicate. Tell your story, let your donors know exactly how you're tackling everything and exactly what's going on and exactly what you need. But let them know, you can toot your horn, while also, someone very wise just said on another panel that I had moderated, it's not a charity, it's an investment. And that's just like your case statement is your investment prospectus. And so you're making the case to them, but be clear and let them know what you are accomplishing, but what you also need. And so then that translates to the donor saying, okay, so I get that. And now I understand how things are going. You know, everybody gets a break this year because it's been a tough year for the entire planet. But they're going to be watching what you're able to get done, how you've been able to pivot in some ways, and let them know that too as the organization. If you need more in order to make this great pivot of 2020, let them know, because I think a lot of donors who are loyal to organizations will stick by them. And I think loyalty is a key word right now. There may not be a ton of people outside of some of the big machines, big, huge institutional organizations. Donors are probably going to give to where they've already given. But with crowdfunding and lots of different efforts, you just never know. But communication has to be clear, and ducks in a row as far as being able to tell the story of what you've accomplished and what your needs are.
Yolanda, thank you. One last question for you today. So many people ask the question, what advice would you give to your 16-year-old self? I like to ask the question, what advice would you like to give to your 85-year-old self?
Oh, to my 85-year-old self. Enjoy it. Enjoy what's left, because it's been a wild and interesting ride. It will be. And enjoy and look back and be happy about whatever you did. You did your best.
I love that. Thank you, Yolanda. And congratulations again on all of your success. And you're incredibly talented. And I can't wait to stay caught up with you, and would love to host you back on our show again sometime very soon.
Thank you so much. This has been such a joy. Nebraska connection, yes.
Oh my gosh, that's right. We have the Nebraska connection. We're both from Nebraska. Love that too. Thank you everyone for watching us. I'm Jan Rams, the Vice President of U.S. Development with Mayshad. Please make sure to stay tuned and stay updated with us on our YouTube channel, and join us at joinmayshad.com. We invite you to become a part of our community as we together revolutionize how women connect, engage, and do business together. Thanks everyone. Have a great afternoon.